It is with a very warm heart that we welcome you to today's episode of Tax Matters. My name is Olumoyiwa Matuluko. How's your week been and how's business going? On the program today, we have a very big fish as guest. We're talking about the #1 tax officer in the whole of the Federation of Nigeria, in the person of Mr. Babatunde William Fowler, who is the executive chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service as well as the chairman of the Joint Tax Board. The recording of this interview was done in a large hall on the sidelines of the recently held 134th meeting of the Joint Tax Board. And so please do make a little allowance for a little drop in quality of the audio. You know that we stand for the best on tax matters, but we assure you that the questions and the answers will satisfy you. Mr. Fowler, welcome to Tax Matters.
Thank you very much.
We began by asking Mr. Fowler to paint a picture of the Nigerian tax system prior to this time.
Well, depending on how far back you want to go. If you want to go pre-1999, basically we had the tax laws in place, but no one really paid any attention to tax revenue, and therefore tax administration was put on the back burner. With the coming of His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and I believe at the time when the federal government withheld the funds of Lagos State, they knew that the only way to survive was to generate internally revenue that they could use to fulfill their mandate. And of course, him being an accountant, knew that the tax laws were not being obeyed, and he started a reform of the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service. And that's when the reform started, and Lagos State at that point in time, in 2006, was generating an average of about 3.6 billion per month. And as of mid last year, June, it went up to 23 billion per month. Now, that did not change because the rates were increased. Actually, the tax rates were reduced. The cap was reduced from 25 to 24%. But all the tax laws that had been in our books pre-independence were applied. And basically, other states started to follow suit. And of course, when the oil price dropped and the monthly allocation started to go on a decline, other states dusted their tax books and started to apply the same principle. So prior to 1999, taxation wasn't really considered as anything important. And because the oil revenue kept on increasing and the monthly allocation increased also, state governments just relied on the monthly allocation. Right now, we now have a better understanding as Nigerians, and members of the Joint Tax Board, which are the chairman of all the various 36 state boards of internal revenue and also the FCT, now know that it now lies squarely on their shoulders to provide revenue for their states and also for FIRS to provide revenue for the federal, state and local governments.
So there was this phrase that was coined in Delta State by the immediate past administration, Delta Beyond Oil. And now we say, what are your plans for Nigeria beyond oil? Or let's put it in another way, what is the focus of your administration? What are your areas of emphasis?
Well, our areas of emphasis, for one, is for us to have a mutual beneficial working relationship between the Federal Inland Revenue Service and all the state boards of internal revenue. You can't have an effective or efficient tax system if we work separately. Now, by the law, the state has constitutional independence. And the Joint Tax Board is just a formal gathering of all tax administrators to make sure that we have efficient service delivery in tax administration to all taxpayers. But now we've taken it a step further, whereby we can exchange information, exchange tax data, we can help each other. So for states that need support, maybe in terms of personnel or in terms of skill, without charging them, of course, we can be of assistance. Likewise, the states who have their own tax databases can also give us information to make sure that all taxpayers are brought into TaxNet. So basically, where you have a situation whereby at the federal level, which relies mainly on corporate tax, and at the state level, which relies mainly on payee, combined, then the tax dodgers will find out they have nowhere to hide.
Set a target of 1.95 trillion for the FIRS in 2016. That's huge.
Yes.
How feasible is it? From what sources do you expect to rake in this huge collection?
Well, we looked at our past performance. We looked at ourselves objectively also. We knew that we could do better. We looked at the area of VAT, and we found out that in terms of compliance, we're still under 10%. And so we increased the VAT budget to 2 trillion. Prior to that, we used to average about maybe 750 billion. So we have times it by almost times 3. And we think that once you get everybody on board, that should fill part of the gap. We looked at the corporate income tax. We still have quite a number of organizations that have not filed, that have not paid. And so we're looking at trying to achieve a 95% level of compliance and also increasing the tax net. We've been able to add about 363,000 new corporate accounts that never paid any taxes before. So we think that there is potential for us to achieve that target. So we have challenged ourselves. And at the same time, we have also realized that what we're doing is not only to achieve a target, but to meet the needs of Nigeria and the Nigerian people at this point in time.
Under the ECOWAS framework, this common external tariff is being canvassed that Nigeria should at least move up to the ECOWAS average. We are currently at 5%. We want to put you on the spot. The IMF has asked for an increase in the rate of VAT. Some other people have also said so. Do you support an increase in the rate of VAT? Would that be one of the ways in which you hope to raise money?
No, in meeting this target, we did not factor an increase in VAT. And the answer is simple. Taxation should be fair. And until we have a majority of people paying VAT, it's not fair to burden the few that are paying by increasing it. You also have to look at the economic state of the country. If you increase taxation or you increase the rate of VAT, what impact would it have on the sale of items that are being produced locally? So we don't want to add more burden to the citizens at this point in time, but we believe that once we bring in more people and everyone is paying, and then if there is now a need for additional revenue not to meet up the ECOWAS standard, because we have different economies, we will do what we believe is in the best interest of Nigeria.
But they are arguing that it affects the flow of goods across borders, that our 5% is a drag on the economies of our neighbors, Benin Republic, Ghana, Togo, Cameroon.
Well, let me try and put it this way. Between Ghana and Nigeria, I think we control close to 85% of all the GDP in the West African sub-region. And at the same time, when it comes to goods, Nigeria is a major supplier to most West African countries in the area of plastics, in the area of petroleum products. So basically, we feed the West African sub-region with such items. Now, if we were to increase the VAT, it would become more expensive for them. Now, will they be able to afford it? Now, some of the West African countries also have different work relationships with their previous colonial, I won't call them masters, but their colonial relationships. And France, for example, may decide to give aid to some of its colonial relationships. I don't call them subordinates. Yes, but at the same time, we have different relationships with Britain. So we really can't tie our whole economy and the people of Nigeria and ask them to pay more tax just to bring it up to par with other West African countries.
Putting you on the spot again, people have also canvassed for an increase in the rate of education tax, which is currently 2%. Some are canvassing for an increase. Some have suggested the introduction of security tax. What's your take on all this?
Well, let me put it this way. In some countries, they've applied that same principle. Ghana, for example, they had an educational tax, and they made sure they channeled that tax into the field of education. And now Ghana can boast of some of the best universities in the West African sub-region. Nigeria as a country, also at 2%, I think that tax is adequate. I think when we're putting together our budget, the Ministry of Education should be the forerunner when it comes to the area of taxation. And I think we should be careful as to how we try and burden the corporate world with additional taxes, knowing that they're there to make a profit, they're there to give a return to their shareholders. So we should not kill business, which will create employment and make sure that Nigeria as a country becomes more productive. We have to have our companies up and running. The companies have to start engaging our unemployed youth, and then with that, we'll get more tax revenue.
The Federal Inland Revenue Service FIRS calls on all corporate organizations operating in Nigeria to register for the purpose of payment of taxes and obtain a tax identification number TIN. All registered companies must obtain a tax identification number immediately from the nearest FIRS office. You can also collect and return tax registration forms from the Federal Inland Revenue Service Engagement and Enlightenment Tax Teams (FEET) on compliance checks exercise in your area. A company which is yet to commence business after at least 6 months of incorporation must pay a pre-operational levy of 20,000 naira in the first year and 25,000 naira for subsequent years to obtain its tax clearance certificate (TCC). Note that filing and payment of VAT and withholding tax returns must be done on or before the 21st day of every month. Register for VAT. File all tax returns as and at when due. Be a responsible corporate citizen of Nigeria. It pays to pay your tax. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
Sir, have you found the staff that you met at the FIRS equal to the tax at hand?
Well, I have a lot of good staff at FIRS, and we also have some staff that are yet to wake up to the new vision of FIRS.
Okay, so now what's the role of the training school in the scheme of things? What is the training school going to do in ensuring that everybody is up to tax?
Well, basically, I think that every staff who is engaged in this field of tax administration should undergo some type of training at least once every year or every 2 years. It's very important that staff are brought up to date, that they're fully aware and educated in terms of tax administration, which borders on law and also some calculations. In the past, they've been trained, but maybe not trained as well as they should have been. So we are focused more on training, and therefore we're going to open up more centers across the nation to make sure that all staff have the opportunity to be trained. We've also sent some senior people to man those training centers. We have tried to look at where best everyone can fit. For some staff at senior levels who are not able to key into the new vision, and we know their skill might be better in the training school, we've posted them to training school. Some staff who are a bit weak to the immediate changes in FIRS, we've made them state coordinators. So, like I said, we've looked at ourselves objectively, and we're putting our best foot forward.
What is the current policy on tax waivers?
Well, in terms of the policy, I can tell you what the Ministry of Finance is doing. The Honorable Commissioner for Finance has set up a committee for us to objectively look at all tax waivers and concessions. And of course, the role of the Ministry of Finance is to advise government. So we will put in our little advice through the Ministry of Finance, and the Minister of Finance will advise governments on waivers. However, one thing that is clear is that waivers will not be given except it's in the best interest of the country.
You had some visitors from Tanuga about a week ago, and in talking to one of the visitors, the notary, you spoke about bringing down the rate of company's income tax. Is that on the table?
It's on the table. We're looking at the small-scale businesses. It's still something in work with the Minister of Finance. But what we are considering right now is for companies maybe with a turnover of 50 million and above and below to pay a lower rate of income tax. The Minister will finally approve what that figure should be. But right now we're talking about maybe 20%, so it might be brought down from 30 to 20%.
How is corporate Nigeria responding to your various initiatives?
Well, so far, without prejudice to the statement that nobody wants to pay tax, corporate Nigeria so far is responding positively, and I believe in the month of April we'll start seeing changes.
In what ways is FIRS interacting or working together with other governmental bodies like the CBN, the CAC and the NCS?
We're working very well together, and in the very near future you should start seeing a lot of changes. With the Corporate Affairs Commission, for example, we're working on a program whereby at the point of registration you should get your tax ID number immediately. We're trying to ease the process of starting up a business in Nigeria. In terms of the NCC, we're also talking to them in terms of immediate VAT collection through from the telecoms, so that we're putting in technology that will make it tax administration more transparent and more convenient for taxpayers.
And then what is the FIRS doing to improve the level of taxpayer education and enlightenment in order to increase tax compliance?
Well, you're in the media, so I'm sure that you're quite aware that we have started to advertise on radio in various languages. We now have a message out in Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Pidgin, and Queen's English. We also have that information out in flyers. We do have right now what we call beach umbrellas in the marketplace to bring awareness as to what type of tax people should pay.
You spoke about the small business owners, but there are some that are in the informal sector, and that's a huge segment of most African economies. But we know that when you were chairman of LIRS, you were able to use presumptive tax to get the artisans, the organizers, the small traders on board. And the federal government seemed to key into it. In fact, in the last few days of the last administration, there was this presumptive tax regulations 2015 that was just about to be signed, it wasn't signed. What are you doing now that you are on top at the federal level and at the head of the joint outlook? What are you doing to bring in the huge informal sector in Nigeria onto the tax net, into the tax net?
Well, we're applying the same strategy, but right now the Federal Inland Revenue Service is working directly with the state boards of internal revenue across the nation. We have a new directorate called FIRS, which is Federal Engagement and Enlightenment Tax Teams, and they go out, and when they're registering corporate accounts, they also register individuals on behalf of the states. And so we are also advertising, and when we advertise our tax administration messages now, we make it such that it applies both to federal tax and also state tax.
What are you doing in the area of improving the oil, non-oil taxes mix? There was a time we had 70-30. The figures keep going up and down. Of course, you have always said that the takings, the receivables from oil are tied to the price of oil on the international market. But then, now we are talking about non-oil. The senator asked you about Nigeria beyond oil. What is your target, maybe in the next 5 years, the mix, oil, non-oil?
Well, I don't have to go 5 years. This year we're projecting that the mix should be at least 80-20.
80 from non-oil?
From non-oil.
80 from oil?
That's right.
Ah, that's interesting. Now, you are chairman of the Joint Task Board. This taxpayer identification number scheme is being handled by the joint, under the aegis of the Joint Task Board. How far?
Well, we're actually going to do some modification to it. We're going to make it more accessible. Let me try and give you some information. In the small scale informal sector, the chairman of that association told us they have over 27.5 million members who are actively engaged in business. Now, on our tax database, for both federal and the states, when it comes to individuals, we're only 10 million. So that tells me that in a semi-organized association, we still have 17.5 million individuals that are not registered for tax. So we're going to, first of all, approach it in such a way that all states get on board to register all individuals that should be paying tax. And we have set a minimum target within the next few months for the states boards of internal revenue to increase their database by 5 million. And we'll also assist in that. We have modified the forms now to 1 page. And where some states need assistance, under the Joint Tax Board, we'll assist them to carry out this operation.
Now, you recall that it used to be the practice that every decade there will be like something like a review of the Nigerian tax system. And one was empaneled, the last one was empaneled 2001, 2002. And it submitted its report in 2003. We're talking about it to Phillips study group. This is 2016. Is there any plan in the pipeline for empaneling or for a study of the Nigerian tax system?
Well, you see, I think they had to have a study then because there was so much time in between the changing of the tax laws. We've spoken to the chairman of the Finance Committee that has oversight functions of the FIRS, both at the Senate and also the House of Representatives. And we've let them know that we will come forward with changes as the need arises. So it's not an issue of waiting for 10 years. If we believe there needs to be a change within the year, we'll change within the year. Tax administration has to be dynamic. If you listen to even the politics that is going on around the world, tax issues are one of the issues that people who want to assume political office discuss about. So it's very key. It's not something that you can put on the back burner and wait for 5 or 10 years. It has to change in terms with the economy of that country.
So what do you plan to do in reforming the administration and acquisition of withholding tax credit notes and tax clearance certificates?
Well, one, in the area of credit on withholding tax, we came into a situation whereby it was reviewed but was not reviewed in totality, meaning that, for example, you could have a credit of withholding tax, but where you're owing on VAT or your CIT is doubtful, you would have been paid. Now we've changed that, so if anyone has a credit on withholding tax, we'll also investigate their VAT compliance, also review their CIT performance, and make sure that that request for a credit of withholding tax is what I'll call is legitimate in view of other taxes that are also due to the federal government.
We're questioning, sir, when we spoke about that important element in the mix, talking about the human resource, in tax administration all over the world, technology is also one critical element. The FIRS introduced the integrated tax administration system, ITAS, some time ago. How far have we gone?
Well, we introduced it, but it's not yet fully operational. We hope that it will be operational, fully operational, before the end of May, which will make it more convenient for taxpayers. It will increase the level of transparency, so we have all hands on deck.
Now, you are chairman of JTB. What's your vision for the JTB?
My vision for JTB is that we all work together with the same vision and the same objective, which is to increase revenue for the federal and state governments for who we work for, and of course for the Nigerian people. My vision is that for those who are weak, we pull them up, and at the end of the day, we believe that the Nigerian taxpayer will be satisfied with tax administration in Nigeria.
You said that when you were chairman of Lagos Internal Revenue Service, that your governor was like the chief tax officer. What kind of support are you getting from President Buhari?
I'm getting the same support, 100%.
It's a new dawn in Nigeria, and the mantra is change. The wind of change is blowing all over Nigeria and beckons to you. One sure way to respond is to perform your civic duty, pay your tax. With taxes, government generates revenue to fulfill its electoral promises, ensure regular power supply, provide good security, standard education, medical care, true total change. Individuals and corporations enjoy specific benefits, rights and privileges for paying taxes and avoid the consequences and penalties of not paying. Oil revenue is no longer sufficient to bring desired change, but your tax can. It pays to pay your tax. A message from the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
This is the end of April. The way things are going, are you confident that you will reach the promised land?
Well, so far I'm confident, and by the grace of God, we will not disappoint Nigeria.
Sir, I want to thank you most sincerely for agreeing to come onto the program. We do hope that from time to time you will come on set to talk to your beautiful kings and queens out there. And that at the end of the year, we will have cause to celebrate a good outing by the Federal Revenue Service, that is bailing Nigeria out of the current economic doldrums. Thank you for coming on to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right.
There you are. Mr. Fowler says that he has 100% support from President Muhammadu Buhari. So what is left? What is left is for the FIRS to deliver. You know what I mean? Deliver the 4.95 trillion that they have promised us in revenue, tax revenue for the year 2016. We are confident that the FIRS will deliver. So, we thank you for watching. Let's do this again next week. Same station, same day of the week, same time of the day. Have a blessed week ahead.